Hello, readers by eyes and ears. This is Mari Chen, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, we will be continuing the reading of Thousand Autumns Volume 2, also known as Tianqiu by Meng Xi Shi. We will be reading chapters 38 through 40. I hope you enjoy. Chapter 38, Sympathy and Tenderness. Xiao Si would usually try for a touch or a taste of someone this beautiful. But at the moment, he couldn't even spare their face a thorough glance. It was imperative that they assassinate Yuanqing tonight. Bai Zhong had failed once. He couldn't fail the second attempt. Even though he knew that Yan Wushi's presence meant his chances were slim, he still had to risk it. Xiao Si drew a folding fan from his wrist. With a flick of his wrist, sharp blades were unsheathed over the fan's surface. He flung out his hand, and the fan swept through the air at his opponent, just as he leapt forward with a tap of his toes, striking out with a powerful palm blast for his second bout of attacks. At first, Shun Qiao hadn't intended to take action. Each time he fought now meant he'd need even longer to recover later, and it might even deal irreparable damage to his foundations. Furthermore, Yan Wushi was there. So there should have been no need for him to fight. But at that moment, with Yuanqing dragging Yuzi as he ran into Shun Qiao's carriage in a bid for help, all with the enemy mere inches away, closing in with the intent to kill, it was impossible for Shun Qiao to stand by any longer. Given Yan Wushi's style, Xiao Si hadn't expected him to bring backup. So Xiao Si didn't expect that someone else would be concealed inside the carriage. Someone who shouldn't be underestimated. Recalling the latest rumors circulating through the Jianghu, he matched them to the man before him and immediately gleaned his identity. Sect leader Shen, as the mighty Grandmaster of a Taoist sect, aren't you ashamed to be reduced to this serving Yan Wushi? He gave a sneering chuckle, but his moves came faster and faster, the blasts from his palms surging like the rising tide. It crashed forth wave after wave, leaving his opponent without a second to breathe. His fan seemed to have a mind of its own. It worked in tandem with Xiao Si's qi, filling whatever openings his attacks left, specifically seeking out the enemy's weak points. The result? An assault on two fronts. Anyone fighting him was forced to face a two-layered threat. Shun Qiao didn't want to drag out the fight. He didn't bother with his bamboo cane. Oh, it's still here. Instead, he drew Shan He Tong Bei straight away. The sword glares twinned and wove into a shining curtain that cloaked the sky. They sliced right through the powerful palm blasts and even held the fan blades at bay. Xiao Si tried to break through, but discovered that the screen was like a flawless net. He couldn't find a single opening. On top of that, Shun Qiao was turning Xiao Si's own attacks back onto him. The screen reflected his palm blasts, leaving him no space to breathe. When his defenses faltered just once, his chest took a heavy blow, and Xiao Si promptly hacked up a mouthful of blood. Hadn't they said that Shun Qiao was gravely injured? That his martial arts were greatly diminished? Xiao Si was alarmed and enraged. He could tell there was no benefit to carrying on this fight. The four elders were totally unable to hold back Yan Wushi, and the moment he extricated himself, it would be Xiao Si's turn to suffer. He just had to twist around and glance up into the tree again. Bai Zhong, who'd been sitting there, was now nowhere to be found. At that, Xiao Si gritted his teeth. Sect leader Shun's reputation is well earned. This Xiao will return for another lesson at a later date. After saying so, he sent a palm strike at an opening. When Shun Qiao raised his sword to block, Xiao Si sheathed his blades of his fan, and without even a word to those elders, he vanished in the blink of an eye. That moment was a vivid testament to the selfishness and callousness of the demonic sects. Yuanqing crawled out from behind Shun Qiao, still trembling with fear. My deepest thanks to this gentleman for his rescue. May I ask for his esteemed name? Shun Qiao returned his sword to its sheath. It's Shun Qiao. Yuanqing saw his vacant eyes and immediately understood. So you are that Shun Gongzi. Word of the battle at the Su residence had spread like wildfire along with Shun Qiao's name. Whenever he was mentioned, Yan Wusher's name inevitably followed, and in the end, the conversation would conclude with suggestive smiles. Yuan Qing had no connection to the Jianghu and only had heard a bit of hearsay. Seeing the man himself today, he had to silently exclaim that Shun Qiao really was a beauty. He had a striking charm despite his sickly air. Especially striking when the beauty had drawn his sword and fought. In contrast to his frail appearance, he'd revealed swordplay so equanimous and assured that it was impossible to look away. Truly a feast for the eyes. It was unfortunate that such a beauty was already spoken for. Yuan Qing felt it truly a pity. Shun Qiao did not know that Yuan Qing was thinking any of this. He nodded at Yuan Qing with a smile, using the same placid expression. Would Senior Official Yuan like to check on the madam behind him now? It seems she's fainted, said Yuan Qing. Let me see. Yuan Qing lifted Yutze's hand for him. Shun Qiao checked her pulse. She's fine. Her gate of sleep was struck. He unblocked Yutze's acupoint, and she slowly stirred to consciousness. The sight of Yuan Qing and Shun Qiao right in front of her gave her another fright. Clearly, she was still rattled. Yuan Qing quickly held her down. Everything's fine now. Junior Preceptor Yan and Shen Gongzi saved us. Xiaolin, said Yutze. She... Someone from He Huan sect disguised themselves as Xiaolin to get close to you, said Yuan Qing. They wanted to assassinate me by using you, so I fear Xiaolin may have already met a grim fate. That might not be the case, Shun Qiao interjected. Since the madam is fine, it's possible her maid is fine as well. I asked Senior Official Yuan to have his men conduct a search. Perhaps they'll discover something. Yutze tugged at Yuan Qing's sleeves, her eyes brimming with tears. Xiaolin has accompanied this concubine for a long time. She's already been so loyal to me. Master, please send someone to look for her. Yuan Qing melted. Of course, I'll tell someone to look right away. Elsewhere, the 4 He Huan elders had finally lost to Yan Wushi. One had been killed on the spot. Another was gravely wounded as he fled. Yan Wushi dealt him another critical blow. Barring a miracle, he wouldn't live much longer. The remaining 2 were injured as well, and it took everything they had just to escape. Yuan Qing turned his head to look at Shun Qiao, sitting there holding his sword, his eyes lifeless. A swell of tender pity arose in him at the sight, and he completely forgot about Shun Qiao's earlier heroic display of martial force. Is Shen Gongzi tired? He asked. You can rest in my carriage. There's some food there as well. Shun Qiao shook his head. No need to trouble yourself, Senior Official Yuan. Yuan Qing laughed. It's no trouble at all. You saved my life just now. I can't thank you enough. Your complexion is a bit pale. You must be suffering from blood qi deficiency. I brought some gelatin pastries for the trip and will send them to you later. Take 1 slice a day to replenish your blood. They're sweet and go down easy. Shun Qiao silently pressed a hand to his forehead. Yuan Qing thought he was feeling dizzy and reached out to support him. But then he heard Yan Wusher's languid voice drift over. I was fighting a bloody battle out there, and now I see my Ah Qiao about to be seduced away. How perfectly agonizing. Shun Qiao didn't comment. He didn't even need to look to know that Yan Wusher's clothes had not a drop of blood on them, let alone the remains of a bloody battle. But Yan Wusher's unconvincing act actually elicited some embarrassed guilt from Yuan Qing. He quickly withdrew his hand. The junior preceptor jests. I only saw that Shen Gongzi seemed a little fatigued. I'm deeply grateful to the junior preceptor for tonight. I dare not imagine what would have happened otherwise. Outside the carriage, their surroundings were in an uproar. Not only had Yuan Qing's men been injured, many of the merchants accompanying them had been caught in the disaster too. Yuan Qing was the enemy's only target, but the demonic sect never let morality get in the way of their attacks. Only their whims mattered. Anytime there was someone in their way, they'd kill them. The merchants had thought that traveling with an official would be safer, but instead they were met with catastrophe. Deep in helplessness and grief, they busied themselves with consoling their fellow merchants, creating a second commotion. Yuan Qing followed Shen Qiao's suggestion and sent his men out to search. Sure enough, they found Yuzi's young maid by a rock next to a nearby creek. When the girl had gone outside to relieve herself, she'd walked some distance away to avoid being seen, but was then suddenly knocked out. Upon waking up, she had no idea what had transpired. Wherever Yan Wushi went, an invisible crushing pressure followed. The entire procession slept not a wink that night, surrounded by a ceaseless clamor. Only the area around the carriage where Yan Wushi and Shen Qiao were staying was cast in an eerie silence. Yuan Qing left the carriage with Yuzi, then had someone bring them food to show his thanks. It wasn't very convenient to cook outside, but Yuan Qing had brought some jerky and candied preserves along on the trip. There were even fresh melons. He was obviously a man who indulged in pleasures. Shen Qiao had no interest in the jerky, but he did partake in quite a few of the preserves. No matter where he went, his sweet tooth never changed. Yan Wushi leaned against a cushion and popped a piece of jerky into his mouth, then chewed languidly. A freshly boiled pot of honey tea from Ruru sat beside him. The scene cut a stark contrast between the clamor outside and the silence inside. "The assassination failed this time," said Shen Qiao, "but there might be a second attempt. There are too many openings around senior official Yuan. I fear protecting him will be difficult." "That won't be a problem," said Yan Wushi. "He has a food taster to test the poison. This happened due to his own foolishness. He insisted on bringing a woman with him, and that was exploited. From now on, he'll be much more careful. Besides, even if he does die, it doesn't matter. I have another copy of the letter. When the time comes, the deputy envoy can present that to the Emperor of Chun instead. Still, Yuan Qing does have quite the silver tongue, and he's a fantastic speaker. Few could replace him. That's why the Emperor of Zhou values him so highly." Shen Qiao recalled Yuan Qing's breathless stream of words just a moment ago. Involuntarily, his lips tugged into a hint of a smile. Yan Wushi sighed. "My Chao truly is loved by all. Yuan Qing is lascivious, so he goes without saying, but even that demoness Baizhong had developed a soft spot for you. I'm forced to watch you carefully in fear that you might vanish at any time." Shen Qiao wrinkled his brow. "Don't speak nonsense, Sect Leader Yan. Since when did I have anything going on with Baizhong?" "She disguised herself as that young maid to kill Yuan Qing," said Yan Wushi. "In the past, there was no way that the maid or Yuan Qing's concubine would have survived. But this time, she showed mercy to them both. Do you think it was because of Yuan Qing or because of you? Sharp as she is, she's likely already guessed you were here and wanted to leave a good impression on you, lest you despise her more, no?" Then he clicked his tongue twice. "How difficult life must be for my Chao, born a numbskull. He spent his entire life with his head empty of anything other than morals and cultivation. He knows nothing about the love between men and women. If my venerable self hadn't enlightened him, I fear he'd never have understood." With Yan Wushi, it was always my Chao, as if Shen Qiao were something that belonged to him. Shen Qiao had refuted him a couple of times to little effect. By now, he was numb to it, and let him do as he pleased. "But what a pity," Yan Wushi went on. "Her love is doomed to die before it's ever born. If Sang Jingxing discovers her feelings, how would he torture her, I wonder?" Shen Qiao was bewildered. Does He Huan sect forbid their disciples from falling in love? Yan Wushi burst out laughing. "Do you truly not know? He Huan sect is famous for their parasitic cultivation. Everyone in the sect, whether man or woman, practices pair cultivation. As far as this venerable one can tell, Baizhong is no longer a virgin. I trust that her primordial yin has already been plucked by her master, Sang Jingxing." Astonishment filled Shen Qiao's face. It was a long time before he said, "But he's her master." "So what if he is? Do you really think someone like Sang Jingxing, who pays no mind to gender and has a special love of virgins, would let another man claim his beautiful disciple's primordial yin? I don't know how many men Bai Zhong has pair cultivated with, but Sang Jingxing is certainly one of them. Shen Qiao frowned and didn't speak. Yan Wushi laughed. Here's Ah Chao's bad habit again, feeling all sorry and tender toward the weak. Sang Jingxing aside, if Bai Rong truly didn't want to pair cultivate with her sect members, she could have found her way to avoid it. But look at the speed of her martial progress. That's all from parasitic cultivation, and she must have done it on her own free will. And still, you feel sorry for her? What about that woman is worth your sympathy? If you want to feel sorry for someone, why not feel sorry for me? Shen Qiao was dumbfounded. Bai Zhong isn't worth my sympathy, but sect leader Yan is? I fought 1-on-4 tonight. Isn't that worth some sympathy? He took Shen Qiao's hand and placed it on his chest. Look, my little heart is still thumping away, even now. Right at this moment, Yu Renqing's voice came from outside. Junior Preceptor Shen Gongzi, may I come in? Shen Qiao wanted to pull his hand back from Yan Wushi, but was caught off guard when Yan Wushi yanked first, sending him toppling into the other man instead. Yu Renqing didn't hear anything and took the silence as tacit consent. Oh God. He opened the doors and lifted the curtains, and it was greeted with this scene, which immediately struck him dumb. Because from his point of view, it didn't look like Yan Wushi had meddled, but rather like Shen Qiao threw himself into Yan Wushi's arms. Seeing Yu Renqing's dumbfounded expression, Yan Wushi raised an eyebrow. A mean-spiritedness surged within him. Without warning, he grabbed Shen Qiao's chin and forced a kiss upon him, right there. For a moment, Shen Qiao was stunned. Then he promptly struck out with his palm, but Yan Wushi had been prepared. He neutralized the attack, tapping Shen Qiao's acupoints while he was at it. He gathered the utterly incapacitated Shen Qiao into his arms and lowered his head, pried open his lips, and forced him to accept the invasion. Shen Qiao furrowed his brows hard, not because he'd lost himself to bliss, but from the torment of his restricted acupoints that kept him from struggling. Even with his good-natured personality, by now he was boiling with rage. Unfortunately, he wasn't Yan Wushi's match in martial arts, so all he could do was give Yan Wushi free rein. His slender neck was forced back while an arm remained relentlessly clamped around his waist. His jaw was sore, and it feebly slid closed as a thread of silver dribbled from the corner of his lips. But the man ravaging him paid no heed to any of this. He deepened the kiss further. Yu Renqing couldn't take his eyes off the arresting, erotic scene before him. His mouth had even gone a little dry. Finally, Yan Wushi relaxed his arms and turned to look at Yu Renqing. Not done looking yet? He asked. Yu Renqing boasted of himself as a romantic man. He was a well-versed veteran with copious experience. But right now, whether it was because he'd seen something he shouldn't have, or because Yan Wushi was simply too intimidating, he stammered and fumbled through his words. I'm done. Then why haven't you gotten lost already? Yu Renqing was struck speechless. Then he really did get lost, stumbling head over heels like his soul was about to leap out of his body. Yan Wushi turned back at Shen Qiao. For a moment, he was speechless himself, for Shen Qiao was already unconscious. Probably not from being kissed dizzy, rather it was the combination of being unable to fight back and temporary suffocation. Basically, he'd passed out from rage. Yan Wushi had never seen anything like it, and a laugh escaped him. He also threw in a few clicks of his tongue to express his sympathy. Poor thing. He didn't think he'd gone overboard. Instead, he felt that Chifungo's disciples were no fun at all. Chapter 39, Meeting Beneath the Moonlight. It had been hundreds of years since Eastern Wu had established their capital in Jiankang. During that time, Eastern Jin had migrated south and used the Yangtze River as a barrier to isolate themselves from the military chaos of the north. And so, Jiankang became the most prosperous city, not only in the Central Plains, but in all the land. Merchants from all over gathered there, while travelers and wanderers came and went like weaving shuttles. In the daytime, horses flooded the streets in endless streams, and when night fell, the city transformed into a sea of lanterns that shone all through to the dawn. The brothels were even livelier. Their incense cages and gilded rooms were sleepless all night long. Cities like Chang'an and Yecheng were also capitals, but the toll they'd taken, suffering through extensive warfare, was evident. Everyone favored the comparatively peaceful Jiangnan, which saw little fighting. It was seen as such a paradise that there was even a saying that all the land's flowers gather in Jiankang. The officials of northern Zhou, such as Yuan Qing, might not say so out loud, but in their hearts, they all greatly admired Jiankang. The attendants accompanying him had no need to hide their feelings. They were already gasping in awe. This greatly flattered the officials of Chun who'd come out to receive them, and who couldn't resist pointing out the city's various vistas along the way. Once inside the city, Yuan Qing's party naturally stayed at the guest complex Chun provided for them. Yan Wushi was put up there as well, on the basis of his official position and because he'd been their savior. Yuan Qing willingly conceded the main courtyard, moving into the side yard to fret over his concubine, Yuzi. Since the scare that night, she'd fallen ill and become bedridden, then remained that way. Only after they'd settled themselves in the city did she begin to recover. After the failed assassination, He Huan sect had showed no signs of movement. At first, Yuan Qing was still in a state of apprehension, but then he considered Yan Wushi. If the assassins succeeded while Yan Wushi was around, his reputation as the Huanyue sect leader would be in ruins. And in the Jianghu, one's pride was worth more than their life. With this in mind, Yuan Qing gradually relaxed and took his beloved concubine to tour Jiankang while he waited for the summons from the Emperor of Chun. One day, while Shen Xiao was listening to the maid read a book to him in his room, someone came to report that Yuan Qing was there to visit. At Shen Xiao's nod, Zhu put down the book and opened the door. Yuan Qing entered and looked around. "Oh, Junior Preceptor Yan isn't here?" Shen Xiao laughed. "The two of us have already roomed separately. If Senior Official Yuan wishes to see him, you've come to the wrong room. However, I've heard that Sect Leader Yan has business today. He left early this morning." Yuan Qing chuckled dryly. Excellent, excellent. His esteemed self is too frightening. Every time I talk to him, I'm more nervous than I am with His Majesty. Zhu couldn't help a giggle from escaping. Yuan Qing had always been the type to indulge beauties. When he heard her laugh, he didn't grow angry, but smiled at her instead. This made Zhu feel a little embarrassed. Yuan Qing turned his smile to Shen Xiao. "With the weather so fine, would Shen Gongzi like to go for a stroll outside? Jiankang sits on the banks of the Huai River, and I heard that many ferry crossings dot it, each with its own market. Why not go out for a look around and purchase some fresh river delicacies along the way? Then we can have the complex prepare a feast for us tonight." After this, he seemed to think of something else. "But then, you do come from a Taoist background. Might you be required to abstain from meat and eat only vegetarian foods?" No such thing," said Shen Xiao. "I only fear that my poor eyesight might be a burden on your outing." Yuan Qing laughed. "Shen Gongzi saved my life. I was a burden to you then, so there's no need to be so modest." Shen Xiao didn't refuse him a second time. "Then I should be so rude as to accept." The guest complex wasn't far from one of the crossings, so Yuan Qing declined to take a carriage. Instead, he brought Yuzi and the others along for an outing on foot. At first, he was even worried that it might be inconvenient for Shen Xiao. But although Shen Xiao had to use a bamboo cane for support, he was no slower than the rest of them and didn't require anyone's assistance. He walked abreast with Yuan Qing, no different from anyone else. Yuan Qing realized that Shen Xiao carried no sword. "Shen Gongzi, where is your sword?" As if deducing the source of his concern, Shen Xiao smiled and said, "Senior Official Yuan need not worry. If we encounter the enemy, my bamboo cane will serve well enough to fend off a few of them. Furthermore, this is still Jiankang. With the Lin Chuan Academy keeping watch, He Huan sect won't be so reckless and overconfident as to attack us here. The bamboo cane lives as a weapon. Yay. Okay, anyway. Shun Qiao had seen right through his anxieties. Yuan Qing's face went red, embarrassed. No wonder I felt that everything has been much more peaceful since we entered the city. The junior preceptor was even confident enough to leave and take care of business. And that is why. Chun and Zhou are allied to each other now, Shun Qiao explained. If you fell to assassinations inside Jiankang, then forget discussing the alliance. Chun wouldn't even be able to explain themselves to the Emperor of Zhou. So they will do their absolute best to ensure your safety. There are martial artists guarding the complex at all times. You just haven't noticed. Yuan Qing crept closer to him and whispered, Shun Gongzi, I know you're not the type to be a kept man, and I'd never dare to look down on you. The junior preceptor isn't around today, so I'm taking a chance in telling you the truth. Do you know how those in Chang'an see you? Shun Qiao smiled but didn't speak. Yuan Qing thought that meant he didn't know, and so tactfully told him. They call you a dragon trapped in the shallows, forced to depend on sect leader Yan. They think that to protect yourself, that you cast aside your morals and integrity. But I've traveled with you, and you saved my life, so of course I know the truth is nothing of the sort. But it's like how the saying goes, rumors can twist even metal. If you're able, I suggest you stay away from Junior Preceptor Yan. Why let others smear and humiliate you for no reason? Even I grow angry hearing what they say. Shun Qiao knew Yuan Qing was telling him this because of the scene he'd witnessed on the carriage the other day, but it wasn't something Shun Qiao could succinctly explain. He could only say, I'm deeply grateful for your kindness, but you are mistaken. I don't have that kind of relationship with Sect Leader Yan, but because he is a little erratic, his actions often surpass all expectations. I know, said Yuan Qing. Of course you're not a kept man who depends on Sect Leader Yan. I also hold no prejudice towards homosexuals. But given your circumstances now, if you and Junior Preceptor Yan are in love with each other, I fear that the rumors and slander you encounter will only hurt you, not Junior Preceptor Yan. Shun Qiao was at a loss. We're not in love with each other, and I'm not a homosexual either. I know, said Yuan Qing. It's not something you can say out loud. We share a silent understanding, so it's fine. Shun Qiao lost the will to speak. Whatever Yuan Qing said after that, he let it flow in one ear and out the other. The ferry crossing was a hubbub of shouting and chatter. A great variety of goods were scattered about, and there were quite a few people like Yuan Qing, those on foot who'd come to browse and shop. Others were in carriages or on horseback, and yet more were calling out farewells to family from the riverbank or from docking ships. Quite suddenly, everyone was shoulder to shoulder as carriages and horses streamed like the river itself on the verge of trampling each other. Then a horse charged toward them from behind. Perhaps it had been spooked or its owner had driven it poorly. In a bid to dodge, their party was forced to scatter in different directions, and Shun Qiao became separated from the others. However, he wasn't worried as Yuan Qing had multiple men around to protect him. Slowly, he walked back toward the market, following the riverside stalls. Now and then, he heard the peddlers hawking things as he was interested in, and he stopped to inspect their wares. Though his poor eyesight was obvious to the peddlers, his clothing and bearing were completely unlike those of a beggar, so they didn't dare treat him with contempt. Rather, they enthusiastically talked up their merchandise to him. Sir, please take a look at what I have. These are all woven from the finest bamboo strips, baskets, chairs. I have it all. And here are some little knickknacks. You can bring them home for your daughter or son to play with. When he saw Shun Qiao crouch, he picked up a bamboo ball and thrust it into his hands. Here, feel one. It's very smooth, no splinters at all. It is indeed very smooth. Shun Qiao stroked it while smiling. I'll take one then. From beside him came the sweet voice of a child. Uncle, my brother broke my little bamboo chick, so father told me to come and buy another. The peddler must have known the girl's parents. Your little brother was being naughty again? But I don't have any bamboo chicks left. The one you bought before was the last. It takes a long time to weave one, and Uncle is busy right now, so I'll weave one for you in a couple of days. Then I'll help Uncle out here, said the little girl. That way, Uncle can finish selling faster. Could you weave me a chick sooner then? The peddler burst out laughing. What can you help me with? Hurry on home, or your parents will worry when they can't find you. Oh. Filled with disappointment, the little girl seemed to be on the verge of tears. Abruptly, Shun Qiao said, Do you still have bamboo strips? The peddler was puzzled. I do. Does this gentleman want to purchase bamboo strips? I want to make something with your bamboo strips, then pay whatever I owe you. May I? The peddler laughed. This gentleman is too modest. Of course you can. He picked up a handful of bamboo strips and gave them to Shun Qiao. But can you really weave something? What, with your eyes? Shun Qiao laughed as well. I weaved some when I was young, for my younger sister and brothers, so they wouldn't be bored. I still remember a little. He said a little, but his hands moved swiftly. With nimble fingers, he tied a knot in the bamboo, wrapped one end around the other, and then inserted it into a tucked-away slot he'd already woven. In the blink of an eye, a little chick had come to life. The little girl was surprised and overjoyed. A chick! A chick! Shun Qiao handed it to her. I don't know how your last one looked, he said with a smile, so I just wove one at random. It might not be as pretty. It's pretty, very pretty. Thank you, big brother. You're the best. Off to the side, the peddler said a little sourly, I'm not that much older than this gentleman, but you call him big brother while calling me uncle. Shun Qiao laughed out loud. The little girl ran off, skipping and prancing. Shun Qiao's legs were somewhat numb from all the crouching, so he stood, then paid the peddler for the bamboo strips and ball. The peddler declined his money, but Shun Qiao insisted, forcing the coins into the other man's hand. May I ask which direction the guest complex for foreign envoys is? Are you a foreign envoy who's come to Chun, sir? Understanding dawned on the peddler, and he continued, The complex isn't far from here, but with all the crowds, you won't be able to find it with your eyes. I'll take your esteemed self there. Shun Qiao was grateful, but asked, What about your stall? The peddler laughed. No need to worry. I come here to sell bamboo wares every day, and there's nothing valuable. Plus, the stall owners here all know each other. I'll just ask them to keep an eye on things. How could I allow a guest from afar like yourself to get lost? He led Shun Qiao back along the ferry crossing. The main roads are full of people, so it's easy to get lost. Taking the alleyways is faster here. The peddler chuckled and supported Shun Qiao's arm to guide him. If this gentleman is staying here for a few more days, he ought to take a couple more strolls through the city. Most of the food in the South is quite wonderful and painstakingly prepared. Once you start eating them, I'm sure you'll... Something whistled through the air, so small it was easy to miss. The peddler hadn't noticed and kept talking, but Shun Qiao's expression shifted minutely. With a sweep of his cane, he knocked the tiny needle off course and into a wall. At the same time, the peddler's voice came to an abrupt stop, and he fell limply to the ground. The person who'd ambushed Shun Qiao had also attacked the peddler. Shun Qiao couldn't reach everywhere at once. He'd blocked the needle that came at him, but had no time to do the same for the peddler. He'd acted a little too late. And which friend is this? Why must you hide yourself so? He crouched down to check on the peddler's condition and was somewhat relieved to see that the man was only unconscious. Shun Long is so gentle and kind, even to a bamboo seller. So why is he so mean to me? A sweet fragrance wafted over to him, along with a voice so honeyed that it dripped. A small frown settled over Shun Qiao's features. Baizhong. She was sitting happily atop a wall, her legs crossed at the ankles as she swung them back and forth. In her hand was a peony that she must have picked from somewhere. It's been a while, she said. Didn't we just meet when you tried to assassinate Yuan Qing in the middle of the night? Don't you know the saying, 1 day apart feels like 3 autumns? Said Baizhong. So many autumns have passed already. Whether the speaker was Yan Wushi or Bai Zhong, Shen Qiao could never adapt to such a borderline flirtatious manner of speech. Borderline? All he could do was remain silent. Bai Zhong rolled her eyes, then tossed him the flowers she held. Here, catch! Shen Qiao caught it by reflex. He'd thought it was a disguised weapon of some sort, but a touch told him it was a flower. The realization startled him. When she saw his expression, Bai Zhong grew even more gleeful. You thought I threw some kind of hidden weapon at you. Do you really think me so devious? Shen Qiao shook his head. That's not it. What is it? Asked Bai Zhong. When you tried to kill Yu Renqing, his concubine and her maid had no chance of escape, yet you didn't kill them. That proves that you aren't an indiscriminate murderer with no moral standards. On their behalf, I ought to thank you for the mercy you showed them. Bai Zhong blinked. How do you know that I showed them mercy? Maybe I was just too lazy to do more. Shen Qiao smiled, but didn't argue with her. Bai Zhong sighed. You're so handsome when you smile. You really should smile more. It makes me very happy that you think so well of me. Will you let me kiss you? Right after she spoke, she moved. Shen Qiao thought she really was about to kiss him. He reflexively backed up 3 steps, only to realize that she was still sitting atop the wall. She'd only been teasing him. Bai Zhong laughed so hard she almost tumbled right off the wall. Shen Lanjun, why are you so cute? I just keep liking you more and more. There must be a reason you came to find me, isn't there? Asked Shen Qiao. What? I can't come looking for you without one? Bai Zhong said, all smiles. All right, there's no reason not to tell you. I've been following you from afar, hoping to find the chance to poison you, knock you out, and drag you away. Unfortunately, you're far too alert, so I could never give it a go until just now. I went through so much difficulty just to talk to you. Her words mixed truths and lies, half sincere and half facetious. Shen Qiao didn't know whether or not to believe her. He stayed silent and kept his guard up. The chick you wove for that little girl was so pretty, Bai Zhong added. Can you make one for me too? Shen Qiao was taken aback, then shook his head. I don't have any bamboo strips with me. After thinking for a while, he tossed her the bamboo ball in his hand. Here, you can play with this ball instead. A giggle burst out of Bai Zhong. Are you coaxing me like a child? Although she objected, she quickly grabbed the ball and began tossing it up and down in her palm. Has little Bai Nyangzi ever thought about leaving He Huan sect? Asked Shen Qiao. Why suddenly ask? Bai Zhong said curiously. Halfway through her sentence, her expression turned altogether severe, though her tone remained flippant. Sect leader Shen must have heard something from sect leader Yan, and now he thinks our He Huan sect filthy and foul. Are we undeserving of speaking with you, the lofty sect leader of Xuandu Mountain? Murderous intent was pouring from her by the time she finished, as if she would attack if she found Shen Qiao's answer unacceptable. No, said Shen Qiao. Bai Zhong's expression changed faster than the flip of a page. In an instant, she once again wore a smile as lovely as a flower. Or did you want to call He Huan sect deplorable? To say that our men and women pair cultivate without concern for rank and seniority? And you're telling me to change sides and correct my ways? Shen Qiao frowned. I only feel that you might not like staying there. He Huan sect is the place I grew up. If I don't stay there, where can I go? To Huanyue sect or to Fajing sect? Is murder better than pear cultivation in your eyes? Everyone calls He Huan sect a demonic sect, but isn't Huanyue sect one as well? Don't forget that Yan Wushi has far more blood on his hands than I do. And if you're talking about those prestigious, righteous sects that claim they're so virtuous, if you were still the leader of Xuandu Mountain, would you be willing to accept me? And even if you were, what about everyone else on Xuandu Mountain? Shen Qiao was left a little astounded by her long string of questions. Yes, you're right, he said with a sigh. I misspoke. He hadn't put that much thought into his question. He only felt that Bai Zhong was different from someone like Huo Xijing and that it was a pity for her to remain in He Huan sect. Bai Zhong's tone was honey-sweet. I know that Shen Lang thinks I've been suffering in He Huan sect. From the moment you were willing to help even a horse, I realized that you were a gentle, kind-hearted person. Good people like you are rare. This one will treasure these feelings of yours, but she has her own plans, so you need not worry about her. I'll tell you another secret. She suddenly jumped from the wall and floated to Shen Qiao, reaching out to tug on his sleeve. Though Shen Qiao quickly evaded, it didn't ruin her good mood. A trace of cunning shone through instead. You'll reap nothing good if you stay with Yan Wushi, she said, for disaster will soon descend. To avoid becoming collateral damage, you should hurry up and put some distance. She hadn't yet finished her sentence when her expression changed, but it wasn't due to Shen Qiao. She stared straight ahead, far into the distance, before bursting out. This one has important matters to attend to, so Shenlong need not see her off. Then she was gone, vanished without a trace. She must have used every iota of her Qinggong. At first, Shen Qiao assumed it was Yan Wushi's arrival that had forced her to beat a hasty retreat, but in the next moment, he realized that was wrong. The newcomer wasn't Yan Wushi. Chapter 40. 2 Grandmasters. Across the street from him, the clamor of cries from buyers and sellers receded like the ebbing tide until he could no longer hear anything. Shen Qiao didn't need to open his eyes to know that he was still standing in the same place, that he hadn't switched locations all of a sudden. But around him, faintly left, was an invisible force, and its incessant interference whispered to him, trying to impart upon him the false perception that he was somewhere else. It was a profoundly enigmatic experience. When one's internal energy grew powerful enough, they could influence the ambiance of their surroundings, disorienting others and confusing their senses. Obviously, they'd chosen to announce their presence like this in order to put psychological pressure on Shen Qiao. But he sensed no hostility from them, so he didn't move. There came the delicate tinkling of jade pendants. At times, the sound seemed distant, as if drifting in from 5 kilometers over, and at other times near, as if only a few steps away. It reached him from all directions, omnipresent and pervasive, clung to him like a shadow to its master or rot to a bone. The sound of jade striking jade was crisp and musical, but even such a lovely sound, given enough time, would unsettle and disturb its listeners. Shen Qiao clutched his bamboo cane and remained motionless, his head lowered and eyes closed, as if he'd fallen asleep. Then, without warning, he moved. His cane thrust forward with lightning speed, too swift to parry. His body swept forward with a thrust like an arrow springing from a bow, cutting a figure completely different from his normal, sickly one. Like a leopard that had spotted its chance, he pounced at his target with unerring precision. The bamboo cane seemed to lunge at empty space. There was clearly nothing there, but when the cane charged with internal energy and transformed into an arc of light, struck that point, an invisible barrier around the area shattered and collapsed, and the noise that had been cut off came cascading back all at once. "And which esteemed master is this? Why not show yourself?" said Shen Qiao. "I have waited a long time at Lingchuan Academy for an honored guest, but he never appeared. So I had to come here and personally invite myself. Please forgive my rudeness just now." The voice was warm and kind, approached from afar. The person in question didn't try to conceal the sound of their footfalls. They came step by step, clear as a bell, and each one sounded brightly, ringing right against Shen Qiao's heart. Shen Qiao knew that this was the result of internal energy combined with an illusory technique. Just like how they'd muted all the noise, this too was meant to intimidate him from the start. "So, it was Academy Master Ru Zhen," he said. "I've heard a lot about you. This humble Taoist is fortunate to finally meet you today." He was the head of the Confucian sects, as well as one of the top 3 martial artists in the world, and so Ru Yankehui's reputation resounded throughout the land. But his dress was very simple: cloth robes and shoes, his hair also bound in a cloth ribbon. His appearance was plain and unassuming as well. In a crowd, he'd look like any other ordinary middle-aged man. He wouldn't draw any attention at all. But at this moment, Walking across the street, his pace even, languid, and full of confidence, no one could doubt his identity. For very few people in the world had bearing as magnificent as his. When word of the Taoist Grandmaster Qi's departure arrived, I was also in secluded cultivation and unable to send my condolences. Only after I left seclusion did I hear the shocking news. Sect leader Qi was a man of great talent, his martial arts peerless. The entire world admired him, and his sudden passing was truly unexpected. My heart was filled with sorrow and regret beyond words. I hope that Taoist Master Shun did not lose himself to grief. It was only natural that a martial artist on par with Ruyan Kehui would develop a sense of kinship with Qi Fengge, a kind of bond between martial experts. His words weren't simply overdone flattery, but almost certainly sincere. Shun Xiao courteously cupped his hands at him. On behalf of my master, this humble Taoist thanks Academy Master Rujian for your kindness. My master once said that though the age he'd lived to might not be very old for Xiantian experts, he felt that if he could die in his pursuit of the ultimate martial arts, that would be well worth it. So please, I ask Academy Master Rujian not to grieve too much for my late master, for we do not walk our Tao alone, but as one with heaven and earth. Ruyan Kehui. What a wonderful saying. We do not walk our Tao alone, but as one with heaven and earth. Taoist Grandmaster Qi truly was an extraordinary man. He gazed at Shun Xiao. When I left, the tea house was boiling some water. I trust that by now the tea is ready. Would Taoist Master Shun be interested in a tour of Lin Chuan Academy? This humble Taoist has been in the north for too long, said Shun Xiao. I'm afraid that I haven't yet grown accustomed to southern tea. Few people in all the land could dream of receiving a personal invitation from Ruyan Kehui. To most, it would have been an incomparable honor, yet Shun Xiao politely refused. Ruyan Kehui smiled minutely and didn't grow angry. Southern tea has its own wonderful charm. It's open and all-encompassing, like a boundless sea that accepts the waters of 100 rivers. Shun Xiao, too, smiled. I only fear that I will be unable to return the courtesy. It would be terribly rude to refuse Academy Master Rujian's request after drinking your tea. I'd create a ruinous dilemma. The northern kingdoms are vast and abundant, but the southern kingdom is no less so. Once he's tasted Lin Chuan Academy's tea, perhaps this honored guest will find it unbearable to leave, even without his host imploring him to stay. What a claim like that! Did the Lin Chuan Academy drug all their visitors, and that's why they couldn't bear to leave? Shun Xiao couldn't help it and burst out into a chuckle. What is Taoist Master Shun laughing about? Asked Ruyan Kehui curiously. Do you find my words laughable? Shun Xiao waved his hand. I apologize for my sudden lack of manners. It has nothing to do with the Academy Master. I ask your forgiveness. If Yan Wushi was there, he would have spoken his mind, taunting, but obviously that wasn't Shun Xiao's style. Until today, Ruyan Kehui had never imagined that Shun Xiao would be so stubborn. Logically speaking, a former sect leader who'd lost his position would never cozy up to someone from the demonic sects, regardless of his reasons. Rumor had it that Yan Wushi saved Shun Xiao's life and used that to extort him into staying, and that Shun Xiao relied on Yan Wushi for protection. Ruyan Kehui hadn't believed such unfounded hearsay, but Shun Xiao's behavior was beginning to force him to reconsider. I had the fortune of meeting the Taoist Grandmaster Qi once before his passing, Ruyan Kehui said. We only conversed for a few days, yet I felt as if we were old friends. I invited your master to join me in supporting an enlightened ruler in order to return peace and prosperity to the common folk throughout the land. Your master was unwilling to involve Xuandu Mountain in secular affairs, but he supported the idea of proper dynastic succession. That's why he established that 20-year covenant with Hulugu. Even though Taoist Master Shun is no longer the sect leader of Xuandu Mountain, you are still Taoist Grandmaster Qi's disciple. Will you truly abandon your master's guiding principles and policies just like that? Academy Master Rujian is not quite right, said Shun Xiao. Leaving aside my relationship with sect leader Yan is not what others think. Huanyue sect supports the Zhou dynasty, which flourishes more by the day and grants its people peace and comfort. Are you saying that just because Yuan Yong is of the Xianbei people, he cannot rule the Central Plains and untie the lands? My master opposed betraying the interests of the Central Plains people by colluding with foreign tribes. But if those same foreigners come to the Central Plains and learn our culture, if they treat themselves and the Han as one and the same, then why can't they be considered enlightened rulers? Ruyan Kehui shook his head. A touch of gravity colored his tone. No matter how much time passes, foreign barbarians will remain foreign barbarians. They won't change just by entering and settling down in the Central Plains. Look at Qi. The foreign ancestors of the Gao family weren't even from the foreign tribes, but they've been immersed in the northern cultures for too long and have completely assimilated into them. Now they lack even a trace of Han etiquette. The Lord of Qi is a capricious fool who allows scoundrels and women to destroy his imperial court. I fear that the Gao family's reign is nearing its end. Meanwhile, Zhou grew powerful due to the Gokturks. Eventually, they even sought connections through marriage, employing all kinds of tricks to please them. But surely Taoist Master Shun understands very well the danger the Gokturks pose to our Central Plains. In the end, Ruyan Kehui believed that the Emperor of Chun was an enlightened ruler who could untie the lands, and he hoped to persuade Shen Qiao to change sides and choose righteousness. His great sincerity was apparent. Despite his rank and status, he'd come here personally. After all, strictly speaking, Shen Qiao had lost his position of sect leader, and his martial arts were far diminished compared to before. He could no longer match Ruyan Kehui in status, so there was no need for Ruyan Kehui to ask him in person. And yet, here he was. A few months ago, when Shen Qiao had just entered secular society and had little understanding of the ways of the world, such a speech might have moved him. But he formed his own opinions now. After listening, he only shook his head and spoke plainly. At the moment, this humble Taoist represents no sect and is only a lone soul wandering the Jianghu, trying to survive amidst the chaos. Whether I pledge my allegiance presents no significance to either Linchuan Academy or Chun. This humble Shun is infinitely grateful that, out of respect for my master, Academy Master Rujian came to personally advise me today. But all I can do is appreciate your kindness within my heart. Rujian Kehui heaved a quiet sigh. I can hear from Taoist Master Shun's voice that you have a blockage, probably due to long unhealed internal injuries. If you're willing to recuperate at Linchuan Academy, I can help treat your injuries together with the best doctors in Chun Palace. Shen Qiao had once heard Yan Wushi say that the current Empress of Zhou, Liu Jinyan, was Ru Kehui's Shimei. Hence, Ru Yan Kehui was very close to the royal family of Chun. And now it appeared that was the truth. It was impossible for the average person to so casually make a promise on behalf of the royal physicians. Still, Shen Qiao was a little moved that Ru Yan Kehui would go as far as to make such an overture. Many thanks to Academy Master Ru Zhen. This Shun is unworthy of this offer, as lacking in virtue and ability as he is. He dares not accept. Truthfully, Ru Yan Kehui hadn't for a moment imagined that his expedition today would be a futile exercise because Shen Qiao had no reason to reject him, neither logically nor emotionally. All of a sudden, he recalled those preposterous rumors about Yan Wushi and Shen Qiao's relationship, but he immediately rejected them as so preposterous it was laughable, simply impossible. Very well, he said. Linchuan Academy has never forced things on the unwilling. On Ru Yan Kehui's face was a faint look of dismay. Shen Qiao's own expression was apologetic. This humble Taoist is foolish and stubborn. Because of him, the Academy Master's trip here was in vain. Ru Yan Kehui smiled. The guest complex isn't far from here, but will be difficult to locate for an outlander. The peddler with you has been knocked unconscious. Shall I take you there on his behalf? Academy Master Ru Yan must be bored out of his mind with nothing to do. Instead of reminiscing with your Shimei, the Empress, you came all the way here to convince Ah Chao to switch sides. Too bad Ah Chao is adamant about staying with me. How awfully disappointed you must be. These words, obviously, were not Shanqiao's. From the street corner appeared a man, walking in their direction at an even pace. Unlike the sounds of ringing jade that Rujian Kehui had used to herald his arrival, Yan Wushi moved in absolute silence. His robes flapped and furled, yet he was as elegant and assured as ever, as if no one in the world could halt his steps, nor was worth a second of his attention. It was an insolent arrogance, but a silent one. Ruyan Kehui remained unruffled, and a hint of a smile even crept across his face. Now that I think about it, Sect Leader Yan and I haven't seen each other since your seclusion. I see today that your martial arts have indeed progressed by leaps and bounds, covering 1,000 miles in a day. Yan Wushi stopped half a step behind Shen Qiao, advancing no further. He sized Ruyan Kehui up briefly, with narrowed eyes. Yet you continue to spin in place and have barely improved in 10 years. After that, the two of them spoke no further, only glowered at each other. A passing observer, ignorant of the situation, would probably think they had some sort of strange, exceptionally intense relationship. Yan Wushi's robes fluttered despite the lack of wind, while the hem of Ruyan Kehui's robe moved nary an inch. Suddenly, Shen Qiao said, "If the two of you want to fight, I beg you do it elsewhere. There is an ordinary civilian here who knows nothing of martial arts, and he shouldn't be harmed in the crossfire." He'd just spoken his last word when Ruyan Kehui moved, but he didn't move in Yan Wushi's direction. Rather, he swept off toward the outskirts of the city. His parting line drifted behind him. "There is open space outside the city." The words carried internal energy. Ruyan Kehui's martial prowess was no joke. In an instant, his voice had reached half of Jiankang, astonishing everyone who heard it. Yan Wushi gave a cold snort. Then, seemingly without moving a muscle, he streaked away as well. Several silhouettes swept after him, right on his heels. All the martial artists who'd heard the commotion and were rushing to witness the battle. For this was a battle that was bound to shake the very world. More than a few people had pricked up their ears at Ruyan Kehui's words. Every person in Jiankang who'd happened to hear him sat up in surprise and then hastened to follow. Even though they didn't know who Ruyan Kehui's opponent was, they knew it had to be someone extraordinary to have warranted a personal invitation. Witnessing such a sensational duel was the opportunity of a lifetime. No one wanted to miss out. However, following the combatants to the battlefield wasn't a simple matter. The moment Ruyan Kehui had spoken, he and Yan Wushi swept out toward the outskirts, one in the lead and one behind. They drifted gracefully, so swift that they only left twin afterimages in bystanders' eyes, and in another blink, even those silhouettes disappeared. Many people with inferior Qinggong could do nothing but gape in the direction they'd gone, then stump their feet or wring their hands in frustration. Still, a fair number managed to keep up. For example, Liu He Guild's leader, Do Yanshan, had heard the commotion by sheer fortunate coincidence. He was following right behind them at the moment and was even able to call to Yan Wushi. "Sect Master Yan, do you remember the trouble you caused our Liu He Guild that night in Chuyuan Temple? Well, today this Do wishes to challenge you too." Not many people in the world were worthy of Yan Wushi's attention, and Do Yanshan definitely wasn't one of them. Hence, the moment after Do Yanshan had spoken, he heard Yan Wushi's sneering laugh. "I, Yan Wushi, do not fight with nameless juniors." He'd also channeled internal energy into his words, and they traveled far. Not only did Do Yanshan hear it while he chased after them, but even Shen Qiao, who hadn't moved from their original spot, heard him too. Without a doubt, so did others. Many people laughed secretly in their hearts, and the less virtuous ones laughed immediately out loud. Do Yanshan's expression darkened. Few in the Jianghu had seen Do Yanshan fight. After all, he was the leader of the largest guild in all the land and wielded great status and authority. His would be a terrible failure of a guild if they required him to personally take action on every little thing. Even so, and even if his skills didn't place him among the top 10, he was still a first-rate martial artist. And yet, He'd been deemed unworthy of Yan Wushi's attention. The sheer imperious egotism of a man spoke volumes. But Yan Wushi had both the qualifications and the strength. So what could anyone do? Other than Do Yanshan, no one else found his words particularly inappropriate. Do Yanshan stayed in pursuit and shouted again. Has sect leader Yan ever heard the saying that pride goes before a fall? He channeled 9/10 of his internal energy into this stab. Everyone nearby was blasted by the shock waves, their ears buzzing, heads swimming, and nauseated. They shuddered involuntarily. They didn't dare look down on Do Yanshan anymore. Shun Chao didn't give chase. He knew that any gap between Yan Wushi's and Ru Yankehui's strength had to be minimal. When you were a martial artist of their level, victory or defeat lay not in the slight disparities between internal energy or moves, but in the ability to understand their opponent and seize opportunities when they arose. A hair's breadth of difference was sometimes enough to overturn the outcome. Yan Wushi and Ru Yankehui knew this well. That's why they threw most of their strength into this fight, if not absolutely all of it. Given Shun Chao's current abilities, even catching up to them would be difficult, and making the attempt would cost him a great deal of true qi. In any case, a duel between those two was sure to take a while. As long as he went in the direction everyone else had taken off in, he'd find the location eventually. He wasn't in a rush. First, he helped the peddler up and walked him to the end of the street before entrusting him to the care of the other stall keepers. Then he headed for the city gates. He'd just gone through them when he heard Bai Rong's laugh. Walking like this, Shenlang? So slow and plodding. How long will it take to get there? Shun Chao raised his eyebrow. Why hasn't little Bai Nyangzi gone to watch the fight? Bai Rong pouted. What are we, strangers? You keep calling me little Bai Nyangzi, little Bai Nyangzi. If you don't want to call me Rong Nyangzi, you can at least call me Peony. When she saw Shun Chao ignore her and carry on walking, she stumped her foot. Fine, keep loafing around. Maybe you're not worried, but I'm worried for you. With such a rare battle, many people have put their all into chasing after them. If you get there too late, you won't be able to find a good spot. She reached out to grab Shun Chao. He was about to flinch away when he heard her sweet cry. Oh, I'm only taking you there, so why are you dodging? Don't tell me you're still afraid of my flirting. Shun Chao was left speechless. In this moment of distraction, Bai Rong grabbed him. Tucking his arm against her side, she applied her Qinggong. She soared onward with him effortlessly, no slower than Do Yanshan had been, like the powerful movements of a swimming dragon. Still, getting a lift from someone else was much more convenient than walking by yourself. So Shun Chao expressed his gratitude. Bai Rong giggled. Thank yous are so cold. If you want to thank me, how about letting me sleep with you for a night? Yan Wushi hasn't slept with you yet, right? Your body, full of primordial yang, is the absolute best gift I could receive. Yes, your martial arts have suffered some damage, but I'm not picky. I'll teach you how to pair cultivate. Perhaps there's even hope you'll recover your strength. No need to practice with the nuisance of Juyang strategy anymore. Shun Chao did not deign to reply. Still, Bai Rong earnestly went on trying to persuade him. How about it? It's a deal that benefits us both. I'll gain something, and you won't lose anything. Why not think it over, Shun Lang? No need, said Shun Chao. Thank you for your kindness. Bai Rong pouted, but relented. Who do you think will win and lose in the battle today? She asked after a while. It was an excellent question. The people who dashed over to speculate were pondering the same question. Some of the well-informed gambling dens in Jiankang were probably taking bets right at this moment. Shun Chao gave it serious consideration. If all goes as expected, Yan Wushi will probably win, he said. Bai Rong giggled. You really do look out for your lover. Ru Yankehui isn't just some puffed-up nobody. I infiltrated Lin Chuan Academy once. I wanted to disrupt their lecture the day before it started, but then Ru Yankehui discovered me, and he personally chased me around half of Jiankang. I suffered some serious injuries, and it took everything I had to escape. Ever since then, I've been too frightened to rashly provoke that guy anymore. A great and honorable grandmaster like him, splitting hairs with a weak woman like me. How petty and unbecoming of him. You're not a weak woman, Shen Qiao thought. Furthermore, you were the one who snuck into someone else's territory. If they let you come and go as you wish, what's the point of Lin Chuan Academy's gates? Might as well let people barge in every day. As Bairong pulled him along, the stockings on her feet gathered nary a speck of dust. Her speed never slowed in the slightest, and she spoke with no shortness of breath. How I see it? Even if Qi Fengge and Cui Youwang came back to life, Ruyan Kehui might be their match. And this time, the duel will be in Jiankang's outskirts, so he'll be on familiar ground. Your dear lover may not be able to win. Back in the beginning, when people had misunderstood Shen Qiao and Yan Wusher's relationship, Shen Qiao had still felt the urge to explain. But later, he realized that such explanations were completely unnecessary. People believed whatever they wanted to believe. Whether he explained or not had no effect on their self-serving misunderstandings. And when it came to someone like Bai Zhong, who was purely messing around, deliberately misunderstanding in order to tease him, Shen Qiao could be bothered even less. He simply let her words breeze past him in the wind. Bai Zhong heaved a sweet-sounding humph at his non-reaction and said no more. After leaving the city and traveling about 15 kilometers, going from field to forest, then from forest to another road north, they arrived at a stream at the bottom of a canyon. Here, they saw two silhouettes in the distance, standing upon the mountain cliffs and dueling atop those sheer walls. The ground beneath their feet was no more than a few rocky cracks jutting up from the precipice, some no longer than a handspan. An ordinary person would have been terrified to the core just looking at them, let alone landing atop them in the middle of a duel. A moment of carelessness would mean a straight plummet down. However, Ruyan Kehui and Yan Wusher weren't ordinary people. As they darted about, their movements showed no hint of awkwardness or hesitation. Instead, they flowed as smoothly as drifting clouds or a babbling stream. It was almost impossible to see them alighting on the stones at all. Their figures soared and flitted, their true qi flooding the surroundings and sending fine rubble flying. Where the blasts from their palms struck, clouds seemed to billow from their sleeves as waves. The height of men swelled. It was a dazzling sight to behold. Agitated by their true qi, the waters that once flowed south instantly became a surging fountain. Borrowing its momentum, Yan Wusher guided the spout. Combining its water with the spring water's finger technique, he transformed the stream into 1,000 razor-sharp blades that swept toward Ruyan Kehui. From where Shen Qiao and Bai Zhong stood, the towering spray churned up by internal energy seemed to swallow Ruyan Kehui whole. Though Bai Zhong strained to see, she could only discern a few blurred shadows and was completely unable to spot exactly where Ruyan Kehui would appear, or even from where he'd launch his counterattack. The mountain gales were strong to begin with. These, combined with the two fighters using most of their internal energy, created two powerful airflows that met within the canyon, twisting together into a giant vortex. The tempest was so fearsome that the river's flow reversed while the mighty winds coursed into robes, causing them to swell and rustle. Bai Zhong had no desire to channel her own internal qi to block the currents. If she tried and found that her internal energy was weaker than the gale, she'd only end up hurting herself. All she could do was go on enduring the torment that buffeted her face, lashing her with vapor and loose leaves. Turning her head, she saw that Shen Qiao had lifted his sleeves in front of his face to shield himself from all the vapor and dust that was pelting at him. Bai Zhong was about to tease him, to ask how he meant to watch the match like that. But then she recalled that he couldn't see anyway. Are you listening to them duel? She just had to ask, curious. What can you hear? I can hear the flow of their true qi, said Shen Qiao. If I'm not wrong, Academy Master Zhu Yan is about to draw his sword. How do you know that? Asked Bai Rong. Shen Qiao smiled but said nothing. Just then, Baizhong looked up and saw Zhuyan Kehui with a single stroke of his sword slice through the watery trap Yan Wushi had fashioned for him. Overwhelming Yan Wushi's technique with his superior force, the sword glare shattered the massive stream Yan Wushi had churned up with his true teeth. It dispersed the spray, cascading down all around them like the flowers scattered by a celestial maid or a mighty downpour. At the sight of it, Baizhong couldn't resist the urge to show off. See? Isn't the location I chose excellent? We even have cover overhead, she gloated. Meanwhile, those other people can't even choose a decent viewing spot, and they dare not use their true tea to protect themselves, so they get splashed full in the face. The nearby battle continued, with one combatant armed with a sword and the other barehanded. Sword glares engulfed the canyon, suspending and overturning the water. But inside the tumult, Yan Wushi skated about with ease. His hands seemed to make no specific moves. Instead, they adhered to 4 basic gestures: pinch, swipe, gather, and flick. Yet he remained brash and carefree, never a step behind. Baizhong's brow knitted in a slight frown. He doesn't seem to be using the spring water's finger technique. It is the spring water's finger technique, said Shenqiao, only transformed. Though it's only one finger technique, there are 1,000 possible variations, but they're all still the same finger technique. Academy Master Ru Yan's swordplay is the same. If you watch closely, all he's using is the same move over and over, but that one move is enough to cover every possibility. Stalwart and infallible, it's capable of fending off thousands of enemies. Baizhong stared with rapt attention for some time, then realized he was right. Despite herself, her perception of Shenqiao shifted again. Everyone knew about Shenqiao's former identity, but because of his loss to Kunye, they all doubted his martial abilities. They couldn't help but feel that not only did he fail to match up to Qi Fengge, but he might not even count among the top 10 besides. Though Baizhong had suffered a loss to him too before, she, too, had always seen him as frail, sickly, unable to keep up for long, and likely to collapse at any moment. As he spoke now, she understood that a Grandmaster was ultimately still a Grandmaster. His observations alone far surpassed those of the average person. You said that Yan Wushi would win, but you didn't say why. Baizhong leaned toward him, and her orchid-scented breath fanned over his ear. Supporting himself against a rock face, Shenqiao shuffled a step to the side. Baizhong made no comment. Very seriously, Shenqiao told her, I don't like such things. If you keep doing this, I won't talk to you anymore. Baizhong forced a laugh. What's all this? I haven't even touched you yet. You're more prudish than a virgin maiden. She reached out a hand toward Shenqiao. Sorts like Yuan Qing aside, when a lovely, peerless beauty like her wanted to seduce someone, even normal men with no interest in philandering fell to her charms. Even if they weren't totally smitten, they at least felt a certain intoxication blooming in their hearts. But Shenqiao was an exception. While she wasn't daring enough to test herself against first-rate martial artists like Yan Wushi or Ru Yankehui, she'd still been frustrated countless times by Shenqiao. Her outstretched hand was blocked by Shenqiao's bamboo cane. His expression sank like a stone in water, becoming severe, and he spoke not a single word more. Baizhong knew he was keeping his word, and she was both a little angry and a little regretful. She tamped it down and said nothing. In the space of a moment, Yan Wushi and Ru Yankehui had exchanged thousands of blows, but neither one showed a hint of fatigue. Their battle took them from one end of the canyon to the other, all as the sun gradually traveled west. The fighters knew nothing of the time, and the spectators, too, completely lost themselves in the fight. Noon passed without anyone's notice. The combatants had been dueling for more than 4 hours, but victor and loser had yet to emerge. Baizhong's skills put her among the first rate of the Jianghu, but there was still much for her to learn from this fierce battle. It was on a level she'd never seen before. Today, it was like a mighty gate had opened just a crack, allowing her to peek through to the scenery inside. Though it was only a crack, it was enough to shake her down to the core. She finally knew what separated her from the Grandmasters and why she'd never been able to cross that gulf all this time. Her martial arts were only martial arts, while Yan Wushi and Ruyan Kehui's martial arts had become a part of their bodies, in their every breath, inhale and exhale, their every pull and release. When they inhaled, their world shrank down to a point. When they exhaled, 100 streams flowed back to the source. When they pulled, they drew in the sun, moon, and wind. When they released, the land itself sprang forth in acres. Baizhong watched, completely enchanted. Unwittingly, she murmured, "Will I ever reach their level in my lifetime?" This time, Shunqiao actually answered, "You're very talented." Baizhong thought about her cultivation methods. For some reason, her mood suddenly fell, becoming bleak. "I can't cultivate using their path, and my path, they disdain it," she said, self-depreciating. "From the great Tao springs forth many thousand paths," said Shunqiao. "Some are fast, some slow, but none are better than any other." Baizhong smiled at him sweetly. "Weren't you mad at me just now, saying you wouldn't speak to me? But now you're speaking to me again." "If you talk about proper things, naturally, I'll give proper answers," says Shunqiao. Baizhong tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Even this little movement of hers oozed endless charm. Unfortunately, her companion was blind, so there was no one to appreciate it. "Since you gave me a kernel of guidance just now, I'll return you the favor. I told you before that you should stay away from Yan Wushi, and you must take these words to heart, Shenlong. Don't just treat them like the passing wind, or else you'll end up dying a pointless death. Someone like you dying in your prime without ever experiencing sex? That'd be such a pity." Shunqiao frowned. "Could you clarify what you mean?" Baizhong smiled brightly. "I can't. Even just warning you is a huge risk to this one. If you refuse to take it to heart, there's nothing she can do." Then she made a sound of surprise. "Oh, they're finished?" While they'd spoken, the two silhouettes had abruptly separated, each landing atop a random protrusion in the cliff face. Baizhong seemed a little confused. Was it a draw? If even she couldn't tell, then very few at the scene could. The whispers of spectators rose up around them, all discussing the same question. Had Ruye Kehui won, or Yan Wushi? Or rather, what they really wanted to ask, could Ruyan Kehui really defeat Yan Wushi? All right, everyone. That concludes the reading of chapters 38 through 40 of Thousand Autumns, Volume 2, also known as Qianqiu by Meng Xi Shi. So, first off, let me just say I'm happy the bamboo cane still got some action other than just, being his little walking stick. I'm a little upset with Yan Wushi, maybe not as much as when I read it for the first time, but him stealing a kiss from Shunqiao, which it probably was his first kiss, I'm a little upset about that. Like, excuse me, sir. And then you have the right to say that Qifengge's disciples are no fun because he passed out. But sir, you blocked his meridians or hit his acupoints or whatever and made him unable to move. And then you basically was like sucking his face. Of course he passed out because he couldn't breathe. So anyway, this fight between Ruyan Kehui and Yan Wushi, let's see how things turned out with that, hopefully in the next chapter. Goodbye, everyone.